The true measure of a hotel is not the beauty of its lobby, but the dignity it offers the stranger standing at its door. A gentle spring rain covered downtown Charlotte, North Carolina, with a silver glow as headlights reflected across the wet streets outside Brooks Grand Hotel. Travelers hurried beneath umbrellas while bellhops welcomed arriving guests with warm smiles and polished professionalism. Inside, crystal chandeliers illuminated the elegant marble lobby. Soft piano music floated through the air, and fresh white lilies filled the room with a comforting fragrance. It looked like the kind of place where every guest could expect kindness before luxury. A yellow taxi slowly stopped beneath the covered entrance. Naomi Brooks stepped onto the sidewalk carrying a modest overnight bag, while her 9-year-old daughter, Olivia, climbed out beside her holding a small backpack decorated with colorful wildflowers. Their flight from Atlanta had been delayed for several hours because of heavy weather, and both looked tired after a long day of traveling. Naomi wore comfortable blue jeans, a simple navy sweater, clean white sneakers, and a lightweight rain jacket that showed signs of regular use. Nothing about her appearance suggested wealth or influence. She looked exactly like an ordinary Black American single mother trying to get her daughter somewhere warm before bedtime. Olivia looked up at the glowing hotel entrance with tired eyes and smiled. "Mom, this place is beautiful." Naomi smiled back as they walked toward the revolving doors. "The best places are remembered for how they treat people, not how they look." Olivia nodded without fully understanding the lesson, but she had learned long ago that her mother's quiet words usually meant more than they first appeared. The automatic doors opened, and the warmth of the lobby welcomed them inside. Guests chatted comfortably near the fireplace, while business travelers checked electronic messages from plush leather chairs. A family gathered around the grand staircase, taking photographs before dinner. Everything appeared peaceful. Naomi paused for just a moment, quietly observing the atmosphere around her. She noticed smiling employees greeting arriving guests, housekeepers carefully arranging fresh flowers, and servers delivering warm tea to an elderly couple waiting in the lounge. She never rushed through moments like these. She believed that the smallest details often revealed the biggest truths. Without drawing attention to herself, she gently squeezed Olivia's hand and walked toward the reception desk. Olivia leaned closer and whispered, "Are we staying here tonight?" Naomi smiled softly. "That is the plan." Neither of them noticed a young front desk employee glance up from the computer before slowly looking them over from head to toe. The employee's expression changed almost imperceptibly, replaced by quick assumptions formed long before a single word had been spoken. Naomi reached the counter with the same calm confidence she carried everywhere she went. She waited patiently while the receptionist finished another conversation, never interrupting or demanding attention. Around them, guests continued checking in as rain tapped gently against the tall glass windows overlooking the city. Olivia rested her backpack beside her feet and quietly admired the enormous chandelier hanging above the lobby. For her, this was simply another adventure with her mother. For Naomi, however, tonight had another purpose beyond finding a room. She had chosen this visit without informing anyone at the hotel because she believed that the only honest way to understand a guest's experience was to become one herself. As the receptionist finally looked up and offered a professional smile that had not yet reached her eyes, neither woman realized that the next few minutes would quietly reveal far more about the hotel's culture than any inspection report ever could. The young receptionist smiled politely, but there was a hesitation behind her expression that Naomi Brooks noticed immediately. Years of quietly observing people had taught her that respect often appeared long before words did, and so did judgment. Naomi returned the smile with genuine warmth. "Good evening. I have a reservation for Brooks." The receptionist, Jessica Miller, glanced briefly at Naomi's simple clothing before looking toward Olivia, then back to the computer. Instead of asking for identification first, she tilted her head slightly. "Are you sure you are at the correct hotel?" Naomi remained composed. "Yes, I am." Jessica forced another smile while typing only a few letters into the reservation system. She barely looked at the screen before stopping. "I do not see anything under that name." Naomi waited patiently. "Would you mind checking again? It should be under Brooks." Jessica sighed almost imperceptibly. Sometimes guests accidentally reserve rooms at another property with a similar name. Olivia looked up at her mother. "Mom, Maybe we can help her spell it. Naomi gently smiled at her daughter before answering the receptionist. The reservation was definitely made for this location. Jessica folded her hands on the counter. This is one of the city's premium hotels. Most of our reservations are prepaid several days in advance. Naomi nodded politely. I understand. The receptionist continued speaking before making any serious effort to search the system. If price is a concern, there are several comfortable hotels about 5 miles from here that may better fit your needs. Naomi blinked once, not because she felt insulted, but because she wanted to be certain she had heard correctly. Price is not the concern, she answered calmly. I simply have a reservation. Jessica looked unconvinced. Do you have a confirmation email? Naomi reached into her bag for her phone. Before she could unlock it, another guest approached the counter carrying expensive luggage. Jessica immediately turned away from Naomi with an enthusiastic smile. Good evening, sir. Welcome. I will be happy to assist you. Naomi quietly stepped back without complaint, allowing the gentleman to check in first. Olivia looked confused. Mom, we were already here. Naomi gently placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Sometimes patience tells us more than frustration ever could. The gentleman completed his check-in within moments and thanked Jessica before walking toward the elevators. Jessica returned to Naomi with noticeably less enthusiasm than she had shown the previous guest. Naomi calmly displayed her reservation confirmation on her phone. Jessica glanced at it for only a second before saying, I still cannot verify this reservation. There may have been a booking problem. Naomi spoke with the same steady kindness she had maintained since entering the lobby. Would you please search using the reservation number? Jessica hesitated instead of typing it into the system. That will probably not change anything. Olivia quietly looked around the elegant lobby before asking in a small voice, Mom, are we going to have to sleep somewhere else tonight? Naomi looked down at her daughter and smiled with quiet confidence. We are going to learn something important tonight. Around them, a few nearby guests had begun noticing the unusually long conversation at the front desk. None of them yet understood why such a simple request had become unexpectedly complicated, but the atmosphere in the beautiful lobby had started to change in ways that no polished marble floor could hide. Naomi Brooks remained standing at the reception desk with the same calm expression that had never left her face. She did not raise her voice. She did not argue. She simply waited, giving Jessica Miller every opportunity to correct what had become increasingly obvious. Jessica looked at the reservation confirmation again without entering the number into the computer. Instead, she folded her hands together. I am sorry, but without a verified reservation there is nothing I can do. Naomi spoke gently. You have not entered the confirmation number yet. Jessica hesitated before replying. It would not change the result. Naomi looked at her kindly. You cannot know that until you try. Olivia quietly tugged on her mother's sleeve. Mom, maybe she is just having a difficult day. Naomi smiled warmly at her daughter. That is possible, sweetheart. We should always remember that everyone carries something we cannot see. Olivia nodded thoughtfully. So we should still be kind? Naomi squeezed her small hand. Especially then. Several nearby guests had stopped pretending not to notice. An elderly couple sitting near the fireplace exchanged concerned glances. A businessman waiting for the elevator slowly lowered his phone, listening without meaning to. Even one of the bellhops briefly looked toward the front desk before continuing his work. Jessica finally accepted the confirmation number, but instead of entering it immediately, she looked at Naomi again. May I ask how you plan to pay for your stay? Naomi answered without hesitation. The reservation has already been guaranteed. Jessica smiled politely, although the smile felt increasingly forced. Sometimes payment methods are declined. Naomi nodded. Then the system will tell us that after you locate the reservation. For the first time, Jessica seemed slightly uncomfortable. She typed a few keys into the computer much more slowly than before. After only a few seconds, she stopped again. Nothing appears. Naomi remained patient. Would you search under my full name instead? Jessica sighed quietly before typing once more. Olivia looked around the magnificent lobby, watching employees greet newly arriving guests with cheerful voices and warm smiles. She leaned closer to her mother and whispered, "They smile at everyone else." Naomi looked down at her daughter with gentle eyes. A person's character is often revealed most clearly when they believe someone cannot change their future. Olivia frowned slightly as she tried to understand. What does that mean? Naomi answered softly enough that only Olivia could hear. It means we should never decide someone's value before learning their story. At that moment, another family entered through the revolving doors wearing expensive designer coats. Jessica immediately brightened. Welcome to Brooks Grand Hotel. Her enthusiasm returned so naturally that the contrast became impossible to ignore. Naomi quietly stepped aside once again, allowing the family to approach first even though she had still not been helped. The elderly gentleman near the fireplace slowly stood and walked toward the reception area. He did not interrupt, but he watched with thoughtful eyes. Something about Naomi's quiet dignity reminded him of leaders he had known during his own long career. When Jessica finished assisting the newly arrived guests, she turned back toward Naomi with noticeably less warmth. I still cannot find your reservation, she said. Perhaps you should consider another hotel before everything nearby is fully booked. Naomi met her eyes with calm sincerity. Before I leave, would you please ask your manager to review the reservation with us? Jessica hesitated for only a second before reaching for the telephone. As she quietly requested assistance from the evening manager, an unusual silence settled across the elegant lobby. The beautiful chandeliers still sparkled above polished marble floors, but for the first time that evening, the room no longer felt defined by luxury. It felt defined by the choices people were making while believing no one important was watching. Only a few minutes passed before the evening manager emerged from a hallway behind the reception area, adjusting his suit jacket as he walked toward the front desk with practiced confidence. Brian Collins had managed Brooks Grand Hotel for nearly 7 years and believed he could solve almost any guest concern within moments. He greeted Jessica with a reassuring nod before turning his attention toward Naomi Brooks and Olivia. His smile was professional, but noticeably brief. Good evening, he said. I understand there is a reservation issue. Naomi returned the greeting politely. Thank you for coming. We have simply been trying to locate a confirmed reservation. Brian glanced at the computer monitor instead of looking directly at Naomi. Jessica quietly explained that she had been unable to verify the booking despite several searches. Brian rested one hand on the counter and quickly reviewed only the information already displayed on the screen. He did not ask for the reservation number. He did not request identification. He simply nodded as though the conclusion had already been reached. I am sorry, he said. It appears we do not have a reservation under your name. Naomi remained composed. Would you be willing to search using the confirmation number? Brian smiled politely. If my front desk associate cannot locate it, the result is unlikely to change. Naomi looked at him calmly. Respectfully, no one has searched using the reservation number yet. Brian hesitated for a moment before answering. Even if a technical problem exists, we are nearly full this evening. Naomi gently tilted her head. Nearly full is different from completely full. Brian's expression tightened slightly. Ma'am, perhaps another hotel would be able to accommodate you more comfortably tonight. Olivia looked at her mother with tired eyes. Mom, did we do something wrong? Naomi immediately knelt beside her daughter and smiled with quiet reassurance. Not at all, sweetheart. Sometimes difficult moments simply give us a chance to practice who we want to become. Olivia nodded slowly. So we still stay kind? Naomi softly brushed a strand of hair away from Olivia's face. Always. Their quiet conversation was heard by several nearby guests, including the elderly couple and the businessman who had continued watching from the elevator area. Even a housekeeper arranging flowers near the lobby entrance paused for a brief moment before returning to her work. Brian cleared his throat. If you would like, I can provide directions to another property about 6 miles away. Naomi stood again and met his eyes with calm sincerity. Before making that recommendation, would you please verify my reservation using the confirmation number and my identification? Brian looked briefly toward Jessica before answering. I do not believe that will be necessary. Naomi did not argue. She simply reached into her bag, removed her driver's license, and placed it gently on the polished marble counter without saying another word. Brian glanced at the card but made no effort to pick it up. Instead, he slid it back toward her. I do not think that will change today's situation. An uneasy silence settled across the lobby. The elderly gentleman slowly folded his newspaper. The businessman slipped his phone into his pocket. Jessica shifted uncomfortably behind the computer, suddenly less certain than she had been only minutes earlier. Naomi quietly returned her identification to her wallet before looking around the elegant lobby one slow time. Every polished surface reflected excellence. Every carefully arranged flower suggested attention to detail. Yet beneath all the luxury, one simple standard had quietly been forgotten. As Brian prepared to end the conversation and invite the next guest forward, neither he nor Jessica realized that someone else had just entered through the revolving doors, someone whose arrival would change the direction of the entire evening within the next few moments. The revolving doors turned quietly as another guest entered the lobby, carrying nothing more than a leather portfolio and a folded umbrella. Ethan Walker rarely announced his visits in advance. As Chief Operating Officer of Brooks Hospitality, he believed the clearest picture of a hotel came from seeing ordinary moments without warning. He greeted the doorman with a friendly smile before slowing his pace as unusual silence drew his attention toward the reception desk. Something felt different. The lobby looked flawless, yet the atmosphere carried an uncomfortable tension that elegant architecture could not disguise. Ethan watched from several yards away without interrupting. He saw Naomi Brooks standing calmly beside Olivia, while Jessica Miller remained behind the counter and Brian Collins stood with folded hands beside her. Several guests nearby had quietly stopped their conversations. The elderly gentleman still stood near the fireplace. The businessman remained beside the elevators. Even two bellhops appeared unusually attentive while pretending to organize luggage carts. Ethan did not immediately recognize Naomi because she was dressed exactly as she preferred during unannounced visits. Still, something about the scene troubled him. He walked toward the reception area at an unhurried pace. Jessica noticed him first. "Good evening, Mr. Walker," she said with visible relief. Brian immediately straightened his jacket. "Welcome back, sir." Ethan acknowledged them with a brief nod, but did not remove his attention from Naomi. He looked at the overnight bag resting beside Olivia, the reservation confirmation still displayed on Naomi's phone, and the quiet patience on her face. "Is everything all right?" he asked. Brian answered quickly. "Just a reservation issue, sir. We have been unable to locate a booking." Ethan looked toward Naomi with genuine courtesy. "Good evening, ma'am. I am sorry for the inconvenience. May I ask whether someone has verified the confirmation number?" Naomi answered gently. "No one has done that yet." Ethan slowly turned toward Jessica. "Is that correct?" Jessica hesitated before quietly saying, "We searched by name." Ethan looked at Brian. "Did anyone search using the confirmation number?" Brian remained silent for a brief moment before answering. "Not yet." Ethan's expression became thoughtful rather than angry. "Then we have not completed the first step of solving the problem." He extended his hand politely toward Naomi. "May I see the confirmation?" Naomi handed him her phone without hesitation. Ethan entered the reservation number himself. Within only a few seconds, the reservation appeared clearly on the screen exactly where it should have been. The room had been confirmed more than 2 weeks earlier, fully guaranteed, with every detail verified. Jessica quietly lowered her eyes. Brian looked at the monitor without speaking. Ethan carefully reviewed the reservation again before his expression changed ever so slightly. He looked from the screen back to Naomi, then returned his eyes to the guest profile. Recognition slowly replaced concentration. He looked at Naomi once more, this time with complete attention. Naomi offered the smallest smile, saying nothing at all. Ethan immediately understood why the profile photograph matched the woman standing before him. He also understood why she had arrived without any advance notice or special arrangements. His posture changed instantly. Without the slightest hesitation, he stepped away from the computer, faced Naomi respectfully, and said in a calm voice that carried across the suddenly silent lobby, "Good evening, Mrs. Brooks. Welcome back. We have been expecting you." Every conversation inside the magnificent hotel stopped at once. Jessica stared at Ethan in confusion. Brian's face lost its color. Around the lobby, guests quietly looked from the composed single mother to the senior executive standing before her with unmistakable respect, sensing that the evening they believed they understood had only just begun. Ethan Walker's words settled over the lobby with astonishing quiet. For several long seconds, no one moved. The soft piano music continued drifting through the elegant room, yet it seemed impossibly distant beneath the silence now surrounding the reception desk. Jessica Miller stared at Naomi Brooks as though she had misunderstood what she had just heard. Brian Collins slowly looked from Ethan to Naomi and then toward the reservation screen once again, hoping he had somehow reached the wrong conclusion. Olivia looked up at her mother with innocent curiosity. "Mom," she whispered, "why did he call you Mrs. Brooks like that?" Naomi smiled gently at her daughter before answering. "Because he knows me, sweetheart." Ethan stepped beside Naomi with genuine respect. "Everyone at the corporate office knows Mrs. Brooks." Jessica blinked several times. "Corporate office?" Ethan nodded calmly. "Mrs. Naomi Brooks is the founder and owner of Brooks Hospitality." The words echoed across the marble lobby with unexpected weight. The elderly gentleman near the fireplace slowly removed his glasses. The businessman standing beside the elevators quietly lowered his briefcase to the floor. Even the bellhops exchanged stunned glances without speaking. Jessica instinctively looked back toward Naomi's simple clothing, the modest overnight bag, and Olivia's small backpack decorated with wildflowers. Nothing about the woman before her resembled the wealthy executive she had imagined a hotel owner should look like. Naomi noticed the confusion on Jessica's face and spoke with complete kindness. "Most of our guests travel exactly like this. I never believed ownership should separate me from understanding their experience." Ethan quietly added, "Mrs. Brooks visits our hotels without notice several times every year. She believes the only honest inspection begins when nobody knows she has arrived." Brian slowly exhaled, realizing every decision made during the past 20 minutes had unfolded directly before the person ultimately responsible for the entire company. "Mrs. Brooks," he began carefully, "I sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding." Naomi looked at him with calm eyes. "It was never a misunderstanding, Mr. Collins." Brian lowered his gaze. He understood immediately. The reservation had existed all along. The confirmation number had never been entered until Ethan requested it. The problem had not been technology. It had been assumptions. Jessica's voice became almost unsteady. I thought." Naomi gently interrupted before the young receptionist could continue. "You thought you already knew who I was." Jessica nodded slowly, unable to deny it. Olivia quietly looked around the silent lobby before asking her mother another question. "Is everyone upset because you own the hotel?" Naomi smiled softly. "No, sweetheart. They are thinking about the choices they made before they knew someone's story." Ethan turned toward the nearby guests who had witnessed everything. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize that you experienced this during your visit. Every guest deserves the same welcome regardless of appearance, clothing, or first impressions." Several guests nodded in agreement. The elderly gentleman smiled warmly at Naomi. "Your daughter has an exceptional role model." Naomi thanked him with quiet gratitude before looking back toward Jessica and Brian. Her expression remained peaceful. She did not appear angry. She did not seem interested in embarrassment or revenge. Instead, she simply looked around the magnificent lobby one careful time before saying the words that every employee standing nearby would remember for the rest of their careers. A hotel does not earn its reputation when important people arrive. It earns its reputation when ordinary guests believe they matter. Ethan lowered his head with quiet respect because he knew those words had built the company from the very beginning, and everyone gathered inside the elegant lobby suddenly understood that the greatest lesson of the evening had nothing to do with ownership. It had everything to do with dignity. No one hurried to leave the lobby after Naomi Brooks finished speaking. Her words lingered beneath the crystal chandeliers far longer than the silence that followed them. Jessica Miller remained behind the reception desk with tears beginning to gather in her eyes. She had expected anger. She had expected public humiliation. Instead, she had been shown a level of grace that made her own decisions feel even heavier. Brian Collins stood quietly beside her, no longer looking like a confident manager. For the first time in years, he realized that policies and procedures meant very little when the people responsible for carrying them had forgotten their purpose. Ethan Walker looked toward Naomi with quiet respect. "Mrs. Brooks, I am prepared to take immediate action if you believe it is necessary." Naomi paused before answering. She glanced toward Olivia, who was patiently sitting in one of the lobby chairs reading a small storybook she always carried during trips. The little girl looked perfectly peaceful, unaware that the adults around her were waiting for a decision that could change several careers. Naomi smiled softly. "Before we decide anything, I would like to ask 2 questions." Ethan nodded. "Of course." Naomi looked first at Jessica. When I walked through those doors tonight, what was the first thing you noticed? Jessica lowered her eyes. Your clothes, she admitted quietly. Then I noticed your small bag. I assumed. Her voice faded. Naomi gently finished the sentence for her. You assumed I could not belong here. Jessica nodded with visible regret. Naomi then turned toward Brian. And what was the first thing you trusted? Brian answered honestly. I trusted the first conclusion instead of verifying the facts. Naomi smiled sadly. That happens more often than people realize. She looked around the elegant lobby where several guests still listened respectfully. Hospitality begins with curiosity, not certainty. The moment we believe we already know someone's worth, we stop serving them. The elderly gentleman stepped forward with a warm smile. That lesson applies far beyond hotels. Naomi nodded gratefully. It does. Ethan quietly folded his hands. Mrs. Brooks, the employee handbook clearly states that every guest must be treated with equal dignity. Both of these standards were ignored tonight. Naomi looked thoughtfully at Jessica and Brian. Neither attempted to defend themselves. Neither blamed the reservation system. Neither blamed the busy evening. They simply stood in silence, recognizing the truth for themselves. Olivia walked back to her mother's side and gently slipped her hand into Naomi's. Mom, she whispered, are they bad people? Naomi immediately knelt beside her daughter. No, sweetheart. Olivia looked confused. Then why are they so sad? Naomi brushed a curl away from Olivia's forehead. Because good people sometimes make poor choices, and when they finally see those choices clearly, it hurts. Olivia considered that answer carefully before looking toward Jessica. Can people learn? Naomi smiled. That is always my hope. Jessica quietly wiped away a tear. Brian slowly nodded, deeply moved by the conversation between mother and daughter. Ethan looked at Naomi once more. What would you like us to do? Naomi rose to her feet with the same calm confidence she had carried since arriving. Tomorrow morning, we will discuss accountability. Tonight, I want everyone here to remember something more important than punishment. She looked directly at every employee standing nearby. Every guest who walks through these doors is somebody's parent, somebody's child, somebody's greatest love, and somebody deserving of respect before they ever speak a single word. If we forget that, we have already failed long before we hand them a room key. The lobby remained silent once again, but this time the silence felt different. It no longer carried tension. It carried reflection, and every person standing there sensed that the most important decision of the evening had not yet been made. The following morning sunlight poured through the tall lobby windows, filling Brooks' grand hotel with a quiet warmth that felt completely different from the tension of the previous evening. Employees arrived earlier than usual, speaking softly as they prepared for a company meeting that had not been scheduled on the calendar. Every member of the hotel staff knew something important was about to happen. Jessica Miller hardly slept the night before. She replayed every moment of the conversation again and again, wishing she had simply entered the confirmation number before making assumptions. Brian Collins carried the same weight. During his years as manager, he had measured success through occupancy rates, financial reports, and guest reviews, but he now understood that none of those numbers could compensate for a single moment when a guest felt unseen. Ethan Walker welcomed everyone into the small conference room before Naomi Brooks quietly entered with Olivia beside her. Naomi carried the same simple overnight bag she had brought the evening before. She intentionally placed it beside her chair before greeting every employee with a warm smile. No one missed the message. She wanted them to remember exactly how she had looked when they first judged her. Ethan stood to begin the meeting. Last night revealed a failure in our culture, not simply a failure in procedure. Procedures can be rewritten. Culture must be lived every day. Naomi nodded before addressing the room herself. I founded this company with one belief. Luxury is not created by expensive furniture or beautiful buildings. Luxury begins the moment a guest feels respected. Every employee listened without looking away. Jessica slowly stood from her chair. Mrs. Brooks, I cannot change what I did, but I would like the chance to earn back the trust one lost. Brian also rose. I should have verified the facts before supporting the first conclusion. I accept full responsibility for my decision. Naomi remained silent for a thoughtful moment before answering. Accountability is not proven by saying the right words. It is proven by becoming a different person after making the wrong choice. Ethan opened a folder containing updated training materials prepared overnight. Naomi smiled gently. No one is being dismissed today. Several employees looked up in surprise. Jessica covered her mouth, unable to believe what she had heard. Naomi continued calmly. You will all participate in a new hospitality program built around empathy, observation, and respect. Every employee, every manager, and every executive, including me, will complete the same training together. Leadership is never exempt from learning. Relief mixed with gratitude filled the room. Olivia looked proudly at her mother before quietly whispering, "Mom, you gave them another chance." Naomi smiled. Someone once gave me one too. Ethan closed the meeting by placing a small framed card at the front of the room. Printed across it were the values that would soon appear in every Brooks hospitality property across the country. The first line read, "Every guest deserves dignity before verification." The second read, "Curiosity must always come before judgment." The final line simply read, "Respect is our first service." As employees left the room, they no longer saw Naomi only as the owner of the company. They saw her as the person who had quietly reminded them why the company existed in the first place. And before the day had ended, the culture of Brooks Grand Hotel had already begun changing one respectful conversation at a time. 3 months later, Brooks Grand Hotel welcomed guests with the same elegant architecture, polished marble floors, and crystal chandeliers. Yet anyone who walked through the front doors immediately sensed that something deeper had changed. Employees greeted every visitor with genuine warmth before asking a single question. Bellhops smiled first and reached for luggage second. Receptionists welcomed families, business travelers, elderly couples, and first-time visitors with exactly the same respect, whether they arrived in luxury vehicles or stepped out of ordinary taxis carrying worn travel bags. The transformation could not be measured only through customer surveys, although those had reached the highest satisfaction scores in the company's history. It could be seen in countless small moments that never appeared in reports. Jessica Miller had become one of the hotel's most trusted guest relations specialists. She no longer assumed anything about the people standing before her. Instead, she asked thoughtful questions, listened carefully, and treated every conversation as though it mattered. New employees often wondered why she spent extra time greeting each guest with sincere attention. She would simply smile and answer, "You never know whose story is standing in front of you." Brian Collins had also changed. Rather than remaining behind his office door, he spent part of every shift walking through the lobby, greeting guests personally and encouraging younger employees to solve problems with empathy before policy. Ethan Walker watched these quiet improvements with genuine satisfaction because he understood that lasting leadership was never measured by one dramatic decision. It was measured by thousands of ordinary choices repeated every day. On a bright Saturday afternoon, Naomi Brooks returned to the hotel with Olivia, once again without announcing her visit. This time, neither woman dressed differently than before. Naomi still wore simple jeans, comfortable sneakers, and a modest sweater. Olivia still carried the same small backpack decorated with colorful wildflowers. As they entered the lobby, Jessica looked up from the reception desk and smiled warmly before recognizing them. She walked around the counter rather than waiting behind it. "Welcome back," she said sincerely. "We are honored to have you with us." Naomi smiled with quiet gratitude. "Thank you, Jessica." Olivia noticed another family entering behind them carrying several grocery bags and looking tired after a long drive. Before Jessica continued helping Naomi, she warmly greeted the arriving family with exactly the same kindness. Naomi watched without saying a word. She simply smiled. Olivia gently tugged on her mother's hand. "Mom," she whispered, "she treats everyone the same now." Naomi looked at her daughter with proud eyes. "That is how you know someone has truly learned." Later that evening, Ethan joined them briefly in the lobby lounge overlooking the city lights. "The culture you hoped for is becoming real," he said quietly. Naomi looked around the room where guests laughed together, children played board games near the fireplace, and employees moved confidently from one conversation to the next. "Culture is never built by one speech," she answered. "It is built by people choosing respect over assumption every single day." As she and Olivia prepared to leave the next morning, the little girl looked back at the hotel one final time. "Mom, do you think people will remember that you own this place?" Naomi smiled gently as they stepped into the morning sunshine. Maybe for a little while, she said. But I hope they remember something much more important. Olivia looked up with curious eyes. What is that? Naomi squeezed her daughter's hand as they walked toward the waiting taxi. I hope they remember how they were made to feel. The hotel doors quietly closed behind them while another family entered with hopeful smiles.